What the hell is the point of this movie? I cannot figure it out to save my life.
For once in my life, I didn't feel so alone anymore.
When walking out of my screening of Joker Folie, I heard a lot of audience members talking about this movie. What the hell was that? Really? That's it? This is the best they could do? I will have to admit, while watching this movie, I kept thinking to myself, wow, this is conceptually interesting. Wow, this movie is taking far more storytelling risks than the predecessor did. And then I think to myself, why is this movie really not working then? And that's what we're talking about today. To organize my thoughts, I went to Reddit and I did an AMA. I saw Joker Folie, ask me anything. These are all the top responses that I got that I think are going to be useful for organizing the discussion of Joker Folie and why I essentially found this movie a failure. Was this movie as bad as the reception out of the film festivals suggest? How was Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga as the leads of this film? Did the musical elements prove a strength? Is Joker Folie an Oscar contender? If I enjoyed the first movie, will I enjoy Folie? And finally, why is the ending seemingly so divisive? We are going to get to all of those questions in this review. I wanted to take a second and acknowledge what Joker Folie is trying to say, because I think it's so important to try to understand the intent of a filmmaker. And the issue, and I think the failure of this movie, is it has way too many ideas and none of them are fleshed out. I just wrote a list of what I believe this film is trying to say through the character of the Joker. Folie is the story of the failure of public health. Joker also serves as a stand-in for mentally unwell people and their treatment within society. Joker is also a story about generational trauma. Joker tells a story about the dangers of romanticizing true crime. Joker is about the criminalization and dehumanization inherent within law and order. And then finally, Joker tells the story of a man battling with who he thinks he is versus who he actually is. On a broader level, this is all in context to explore Todd Phillips' seeming shame of making the first Joker film and the communities that embraced this film. But let's just get on with the story real quick. Joker Folie follows Arthur Fleck, now facing trial for the murder of 5 people, finds companionship with another inmate at Arkham by the name of Harley Quinn. Now Fleck must come to terms if he truly is a victim or if he is Joker, the man behind such public scrutiny and an ever-growing fan fervor that threatens the moral compass of Gotham City. Joaquin Phoenix, Lady Gaga, Brendan Gleeson, and Catherine Keener star. So let's talk about this first question. Was the movie as bad as the reception out of the film festival suggests? Yes, and so much more. Why is that? I think essentially the things that I noticed on a technical level were driving me crazy from the very beginning. I described this movie as visually unstriking, where I find the first movie to actually have quite good cinematography. I don't think this movie looks that good. There are some really beautiful lighting and framing in this movie. I found it all to be a big nothing burger. Like, it's very hit and miss throughout the film. There, like I said, there are moments of this beauty, but for the most part, I thought this film was incredibly visually dark. Like, it was almost hard to make out certain scenes of the movie. So on a technical level, I wasn't impressed with anything that I saw, really. And then on a story level, like I said, there is this conceptually, there's a lot of great ideas in this movie. The execution just is not there. And I think there's multiple reasons that could be. The one that I'm placing the most blame on is probably Todd Phillips, who I just think is completely out of his comfort zone in this movie. That could be exciting to some. In this movie, I just don't think he has a handle on anything he is trying to accomplish with this story. And it really shows. Let's talk about this other question because it actually ties in. Did the musical elements prove strength within Joker Folie? The answer is not really. There are a few moments where the musical numbers, they really work, and that's just because Lady Gaga and Joaquin Phoenix are really good in those moments. There is a certain energy and fun that they are bringing to it. So you get this kind of classic 1950s, 1960s, 1970s crooner jazz style within this film. That adds a lot of excitement, and the way they pace it, the way they dance, the way they do those scenes, I thought they were having a blast with it. The issue with it is all then staging. I thought the staging of this movie was very stagnant. There is just not a lot of choreography in here. It is very boring to look at. So you have these two really talented actors just making something that is really boring to look at. So while the musical sequences can have some excitement, there's one in a jazz club that I found to work really well. It's not particularly well staged at any point. So while those are what I would call highlights of the movie, they're highlights with an asterisk. And the asterisk is someone else could have staged this scene much better. So the musical element of this movie, which was a selling point for some, just isn't there. And when you cast someone like Lady Gaga in this film, you want the musical to be the standout aspects of this movie. They are, but they do not utilize Lady Gaga's strengths in this movie at all. Going back to this idea of the reception of this film, why it was so negatively received, I just don't think this movie at any point has cohesiveness to its structure. It's a movie that I was just kind of shocked with how little it actually tried offending me. I think with the first film, while it is a film that I am not necessarily the biggest fan of, I think there is a willingness to engage in ugly parts of society and try to comment on them. Now, personally, I found that to be hollow in the first film. This film doesn't have any of that. It's not really trying to offend. It feels really generic. I wanted this movie to just have a little bit more grit, a little bit more bite. Essentially, I would have preferred if I was offended watching this movie. I wasn't. This movie's pretty inoffensive. The issue becomes really clear when juxtaposed to Todd Phillips, who clearly thinks he is saying something with this film. And it becomes even more of a fascinating failure when I realize that this film serves as a metatextual realization for Todd Phillips, who is seemingly obsessed with making sure that the audience knows Joker is a bad guy. And everyone who rallied around him when the 2019 movie came out, people who made him their personality, people who claimed him an anti-hero, however you want to phrase it, they're wrong. I wrote this down in my notes, but Phillips essentially makes a movie that asks the question, didn't I say all there was to say about Joker in the last movie? That is kind of the approach that I felt while watching this movie, where he himself is like, do I really need to expand this? Like, this wasn't clear to people? Okay, because I really don't want certain audience members feeling enlightened, feeling seen by this movie. Some people are going to be annoyed by that decision. I felt unmoved by it. I thought it was, to give the film credit, an interesting narrative conceit. It just doesn't go anywhere of substance, and he explores it so poorly. And it's related to the film's ending, which I will not spoil, but we'll get back to that on a broader level. Let's get back to these questions. How was Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga as the leads? Let's just talk about Lady Gaga first, because that's probably the one you're all more curious to hear about. Lady Gaga, I didn't really care about this performance in the movie. I want to give her some credit. One, because I think she's a really good actress. In 2018, with A Star Is Born, I thought she should have won Best Actress for that performance. I love Lady Gaga. I love her music. She has a really good singing voice. And whenever she's singing in this movie, it's great. The issue with this character of Harley Quinn is it's a empty vessel in this movie to explore true crime and the way people romanticize true crime. And also from that, the way people struggle to identify between who we perceive someone to be versus who they really are. And so a lot of this movie is really focused on this idea of Joker being a rallying cry for citizens of Gotham. And I should note, certain citizens of Gotham. And Lady Gaga is kind of the spearhead of this. If you really wanted to be ungenerous or use it in colloquial terms, you would call her the stand leader. She is the ultimate stand of Joker in this film. There isn't much else to be said about this character besides that. And it is this relationship that I didn't think the chemistry was all that there, where these two characters are matched together. They have a kindred spirit, and yet it is all to explore whether Arthur Fleck is Arthur Fleck or if he is the Joker that Harley Quinn believes him to be. That may sound cool to some people, and that is certainly a departure from what we've seen in the comic book versions of Harley Quinn. In this film, and again, it's an execution issue, there's just no real resolution with these characters, and the lack of romantic chemistry that Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga have in this movie makes it all the more hard to really buy into this love story element that this movie is presenting. Lady Gaga does the most that she can with a paper-thin character. It's still not enough to elevate this performance. I still didn't get enough from her to take hollowness and give it substance. To the film's credit, Joaquin Phoenix does that in spades. I felt like I understood Joaquin Phoenix's motivations the entire time while watching this movie. And what I really liked about this performance in this movie was I felt that Joaquin actually got more character development and also got a little bit more to do as a performer. What I mean by that is there are genuine moments where he is just going for it in a very big way in this movie. There are some really big comedic moments that he has. There are moments where he speaks with a full-on Southern accent. Like, there are certain scenes in this movie where you can really feel him playing with what it means to be an actor and challenging himself. I found that really exciting and unpredictable in a movie that I otherwise found predictable, and thus that kept me locked in to the movie. His wavelength, his performance, his willingness to essentially just feel like he's improvising and trying to break new ground as an actor. I like that. I really respected what he is doing. He is emotionally realized in this movie, and as an artist, he is still serving this movie with the fullest amount of artistic integrity. I always appreciate that about Joaquin Phoenix. Maybe this question becomes obvious now that I've been talking for a few minutes, but is Joker Folie an Oscar contender? Absolutely not. I had made the prediction earlier this year, back in March, right after the last Oscar ceremony, Lady Gaga was going to win Best Supporting Actress for Harley Quinn. I don't think that character is interesting enough to get her nominated. There's a very inherent lack of screen time in certain moments where it feels like this character just disappears from the movie for extended periods. And with that, the best aspects of this movie is just Lady Gaga singing. And if you want that, there's a really good album she just released where she sings a lot of these classic music songs. That's better than the entire movie. I would really suggest you listen to that. It was a complete miss on my part. This performance, I don't think, is going to really move the needle for anybody. Joaquin Phoenix won't get in because he already won for the last film. They're not going to give it to him again for a sequel. And with that, it's not getting into picture. I think the competition's way too heavy. And with screenplay and all that, no. I mean, this film may get some below the lines. I wouldn't be shocked to see maybe a costuming, maybe if they're generous at cinematography. Again, I didn't think the cinematography was good, but maybe there's enough people rooting for this film below the line chances. This film's, I would be shocked if it got a single above the line nomination this year. Let's talk about this next question. If I enjoyed the first movie, will I enjoy Folie à Deux? This is a complicated question, and let's get back to this idea that I mentioned of essentially Phillips rejecting the narratives that build out with the first movie. I spoke in hyperbole there. I do believe Phillips is very proud of 2019's Joker. It's hard not to be proud of what that film ended up being. What I do think he feels some, if not shame, then some guilt or anything like that. He has some regrets that the fact that there was some people on the internet who seemingly made Joker their, if not hero, their obsession. Essentially the Joker, and especially in this movie, you can see him with the ideas of the superego, the id, and then the ego. There's the morals presented in him, which you see through the prosecutor and defense. There is the instinct in him, the id, that is seen through the character of Harley Quinn. And then in the middle, you have Arthur, the ego, the reality of his situation. These are in constant battles in this movie. However, I say that as a conceptually, I think that is the idea. In this movie, it really feels like id, instincts, are controlling every move that this character makes. That's an issue with this movie for sure. Because when this movie shifts gears and we focus more on morality, morals, who we are, what our guided principles are, it does it far too late in a way that just doesn't become interesting. And I think that might be why people have issues with this film's ending. Back to this idea, because I didn't really address it well. If you like the first movie, will you like this movie? I believe the answer is no. I don't think if you really love the first film, I'd be shocked to hear that a lot of people then love the second film. The counter argument to that is, though, if you disliked the first film, there may be something of interest in this movie. Again, this movie has big ideas. Poorly executed, but those big ideas are in there. The ones that they focus the most on, besides the romanticization of true crime, is this idea of law and order and the criminalization and cruelty inherent to law and order. That's explored through the Brendan Gleeson character, who plays a cop within Arkham. Brendan Gleeson gives a really strong performance in this movie. And you can understand the damage that Arkham is doing to its inmates, and how there are actual moral questions worth asking. That is one of the better moments in this film, is when you see the police brutality on display and understand the moral conundrum of essentially criminalization and cruelty as explored in Arkham. This is really well juxtaposed with the character of Catherine Keener, who I think actually secretly walks away with this movie. She's really earnestly good in this movie as the lawyer for Joker's character. She is morality in this movie, and she explores what is right, what is wrong with law in the way that it is conducted. I thought there was at least ideas in place, and you could understand what this movie was trying to cohesively say in those moments. I really liked Keener in this movie. However, it's not enough to really get anywhere above half-baked. Which brings us to the last question. Why is this ending seemingly so divisive? Because this ending, I'm sure some of you have heard about it now. It's been, like, at this point, critically panned. I've actually been kind of surprised with the reception. I heard about the reception post-Venice. I've heard about it from other critics. I assumed this was going to be a pretty big critical divide between critics and audiences. I don't think that's the case. I think critics and audiences are largely aligned based on everyone who's been starting to review this film, based on people who are just general audiences seeing this movie. A lot of people really are not liking this movie in a way that I was pretty shocked with, that this movie, which the first film was such a critical divide between audiences and critics in some cases, this movie seems to be universally mixed to even mixed negative. The tracking for this movie has been bad. And I think one of the reasons that is hurt in this movie is this divisive ending, which I will just say without spoiling anything, I did not like. But it didn't piss me off. I've been hearing some description of people getting so mad about the ending. I've also seen a lot of just disingenuous coverage of this ending. I just want to address this without spoiling anything. There are no connective tissues. Any theories that you've seen online of this connecting to any other movies or anything like that, all bullshit. That's not in this movie. That's not why I dislike this ending. It's nothing like that. This is not an issue of lore or rewriting history, like anything like that. All that is just the extreme of extreme clickbait. Rather, my issue with the ending is it just kind of happens really quickly. We're in a scene, something happens, another scene happens, and then the finale happens, and it all feels like it's the span of 10 minutes in a movie that is otherwise extremely poorly paced. This movie feels slow. And then all of a sudden, it just kind of gets this big adrenaline burst out of nowhere. It just so much plot ends up taking place in the final 5 to 10 minutes, and you're left with it. And my reaction to it when the movie ended, I'm like, oh, there's probably like, we're cutting to black right now. There's going to be another scene. Something else is going to happen. No, it doesn't. Like, the movie just ends, and it's extremely anticlimactic. Nothing pays off. Nothing works in it. And it's, again, just such a shocking thing because, again, I'm not the biggest fan of the first film in 2019. However, I think it is the case of the execution in a film that I find otherwise the story to be extremely hollow. The execution is done extremely well. This movie is the complete opposite. It has that conceptually interesting ideas, and I think the ending could work in theory, but by the time you get to there and it ends, you're like, what? Like, that is how we're going to choose to end this movie? And it leaves you on such a sour note. And I think that's where the divisiveness is coming, because I could see someone being into this movie for essentially the first 2 hours of this movie, and then the final 10 to 15 minutes just being the absolute, like, what the hell was the point of all this? And that's how I walked out of this movie. I walked out and I'm like, what the hell is the point of this movie? I cannot figure it out to save my life. I do not know what this movie is about. I don't know what it's trying to say. I am so perplexed by the decision to make this movie, because it is not just this lazy cash cow type movie where they wanted to just get rich out of this. They didn't really care about the script. Like, there are ideas in this movie. They clearly had a direction they wanted to take this movie. This is not a movie that is just inherently risk averse. This movie is actually quite the opposite. This movie takes a bunch of risks. Even taking the musical genre, bringing this in, having this courtroom element, and essentially being a courtroom drama for large portions of the movie, that is all inherent risk. And I'm like, I should be into this. Like, I should be into the fact that this director really took his chance. And yet, by the end of it, I'm like, he took chances, but has nothing, absolutely nothing to show for it. It's not infuriating. Like I said, I left not mad, but I did just leave like, why? Like, why break the convention of the first movie to then deliver nothing on that? They tried to do something different, and it ends up being just nothing. It's so bizarre. It's so weird. I don't know what to make of it. All I know is I didn't care for Joker Folie. It's a bad movie. There's no other way to put it. There's no ifs or buts. It is just, once the movie ends, all I thought about was, I'm never going to think about this movie again. I'll probably never see this movie again. But you should go see it, and you should make up your mind. Let me know, are there defenders of this movie in the comments below? I'm really curious, although I have a feeling this might be a review where you and I align more than we have in the past. Thank you all for watching. My name is Ben Friedman. Take care. Bye-bye.